June 4th, 1940. Parliament. The entire room knows Britain's about to fall. France is surrendering in a matter of weeks. The army just barely escaped Dunkirk with their lives. Hitler's conquered almost all of Europe in 6 weeks. Every logical person in that building knows what comes next. Invasion, occupation, the end? And this 65-year-old man, whiskey already in his system at 3 p.m., cigar clamped between his teeth, stands up and says, "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall never surrender." Everyone in that room knows surrender is the logical move, the smart move, the move that saves lives. Everyone knows Britain cannot win this alone. And this guy refuses to accept reality. That's not strategy. That's not military genius. That's Sagittarius delusion becoming prophecy. Winston Churchill. Sun in Sagittarius, Moon in Leo, Libra rising, born November 30th, 1874, 1:30 a.m., Blenheim Palace, England. And here's what's absolutely wild about his chart. It predicted he'd either save the world or destroy himself trying. The Gallipoli disaster in 1915, where 46,000 Allied troops died because of his overconfidence. Textbook Sagittarius shadow side. Those wilderness years in the 1930s when everyone thought he was washed up, finished, irrelevant. Sag refusing to quit even when quitting makes sense. The drinking. And we're talking whiskey with breakfast, 2 bottles of champagne per day, an estimated 42,000 bottles of Paul Roger in his lifetime. That's Venus in Sagittarius excess that somehow became stamina instead of destruction. Wait till you see how his Leo moon turned World War II into the greatest performance of his life. How Mercury in Scorpio gave him the exact cutting words Britain needed to hear. How Mars in Libra let him be both warrior and diplomat. This chart explains everything. The genius and the catastrophic mistakes. The impossible optimism and the crippling depression. The way he inspired a nation to keep fighting when fighting made absolutely no sense. But first, the childhood that created him. Because you can't understand the man who saved democracy without understanding the wound. Before we get into this, hit subscribe if you're obsessed with understanding historical figures through astrology. And listen, would you rather have Churchill's Sagittarius optimism knowing it comes with his reckless overconfidence and shadow side? Or would you pass on that energy entirely? Drop your honest take in the comments because I genuinely want to know if his chart's a gift or a curse. Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, born into literal aristocracy, Blenheim Palace, grandson of the Duke of Marlborough. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a rising conservative politician. His mother, Jenny Jerome, was this gorgeous American socialite. From the outside, perfect life, destiny written in the stars. From the inside, brutal. Sun in Sagittarius in the 3rd house, expansive communication, philosophical warrior, eternal optimist even when optimism defies all logic. Moon in Leo, dramatic flair. Needs to be center stage, confidence that can tip into arrogance. Libra rising, diplomatic, charming appearance that hides the warrior soul underneath. Mars in Libra, strategic fighter, won't just charge into battle, he'll plan how to win it. Venus in Sagittarius, adventure, excess, grand vision, indulgence. Mercury in Scorpio, cutting wit, penetrating communication, words that go straight to the heart. Jupiter in Libra, blessed with luck in partnerships and diplomacy. This is a chart built for inspiration, for impossible dreams, for refusing to surrender, and also for catastrophic failure when that optimism isn't grounded in reality. His father thought he was backward, disappointing. Lord Randolph rarely spoke to Winston, and when he did, it was usually to express rage or contempt. More than one historian concluded that Lord Randolph actually loathed his son, just hated him. His mother, Jenny? Winston later wrote, "I loved her dearly, but at a distance. She always seemed to me a fairy princess, beautiful, untouchable, gone. That Leo Moon needed recognition, needed to be seen, needed love, and the 2 people who should have given it didn't." Enter Elizabeth Ann Everest, Mrs. Everest, his nanny. Winston called her womb or womany because as a baby he couldn't pronounce woman. And she became everything. She taught him to read, to write, basic math. She taught him prayers, read him Bible passages, explained the world to him. She was plump, jolly, endlessly optimistic, fiercely protective. She was the only person who poured unconditional love into this child. Winston signed his letters to her 100,000 kisses. His letters to his parents were filled with desperate pleas for them to visit him at school. They rarely did. Age 7, sent to St. George's boarding school, and it was horrific. Beatings were routine. Flogging with the birch was a great feature in its curriculum, he wrote later. He was sickly, had a speech impediment, struggled with the work. He begged his parents to visit. "Come and see me soon, dear Mama." They didn't, Mrs. Everest wrote to him constantly. Here's the moment that defines his Leo moon. Speech day at Harrow years later. Neither of his parents could be bothered to attend. Mrs. Everest came, and Winston, knowing the other boys would mock him, walked arm in arm with this fat, plump, older woman through the town. Paraded her proudly. The other boys sniggered and sneered. He didn't care. One classmate later said it was one of the bravest acts I have ever seen. That's Leo Moon, needing love so desperately that when you finally get it, you refuse to hide it, even when it costs you socially. This is what creates the man who'll stand in Parliament decades later and refuse to surrender. The Sagittarius optimism is a survival mechanism, because if you don't believe things will get better, you're just a beaten child in a boarding school whose parents don't visit. The Leo Moon desperate for recognition because he never got it from the people who mattered most. Hold on to that Mrs. Everest story, because when Churchill's making the biggest decisions of wwii, the prayers she taught him as a child come flooding back. The ones he learned at her knee. Terrible student, bottom of his class. But here's the Sag thing. He wasn't dumb. He was bored. Sagittarius needs to understand why, needs the big picture, needs meaning. Memorizing Latin conjugations? Pointless. But history, English, the grand narratives of civilization, that's where he excelled. He could see the sweep of human events, the patterns, the meaning. At 20, he joined the army because the Leo Moon needed glory and the Sagittarius sun craved adventure. Can't get both sitting around in England. He fought in Cuba, India, Sudan, South Africa, as both a soldier and a war correspondent, writing about his adventures, making himself famous. Sagittarius loves danger and travel and the thrill of it. Boer War, 1899. He's 25, gets captured, prisoner of war camp. This should end him. Instead, he escapes through a bathroom window, hides in a mine shaft, stows away on a train, travels hundreds of miles through enemy territory, makes it back to British lines and becomes a national hero. The confidence, the belief that of course he'd escape and of course it would work out. That's Sag faith in action. Oh, and the supplies he took to the war front? 36 bottles of wine, 18 bottles of aged scotch, 6 bottles of vintage brandy at age 25. He later joked, "The water was not fit to drink. To make it palatable, we had to add whiskey. By diligent effort, I learned to like it." Venus in Sagittarius announces itself early. Every battle was a story to tell later. Every risk fed that eternal optimism. Mars in Libra made him strategic, not just reckless. He fought smart, planned how to win, how to turn adventure into career. Age 26, elected to Parliament in 1900. And here's where you see the Sagittarius refusing to be shackled by institutions. He switched parties, conservative to liberal. Then years later, back to conservative. Most politicians, career ending. Churchill, Sag doesn't do loyalty to institutions, only to principles. He followed what he believed was right, and if that meant crossing the floor, so be it. The establishment hated him for it, called him a traitor to his class. He didn't care. By 1911, he's First Lord of the Admiralty, in charge of the British Navy, modernizing the fleet, preparing for war with Germany because he can see it coming. Sagittarius sees the big picture others miss. While everyone else is in denial, he's building battleships. Then World War I starts, and Churchill has this grand vision, this brilliant strategic idea. Instead of the bloodbath on the Western Front, open a new front. Attack through the Dardanelles. Knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war, relieve pressure on Russia, end the war faster. On paper, genius. February 1915, the Gallipoli campaign begins, and this is where we see the Sagittarius shadow side in full devastating effect. The naval assault fails. Mines the Allies didn't know about. Turkish defenses stronger than expected. 9 battleships sunk or crippled. So they pivot to a land invasion, April 25, 1915. Allied troops land on the Gallipoli Peninsula, and it turns into a nightmare. 8 months of trench warfare. Disease, starvation, slaughter. 250,000 casualties on each side, 46,000 Allied troops dead. 65,000 Turkish troops gone. By January 1916, they evacuate. The campaign is an unmitigated disaster, and Churchill gets the blame. He was the one who championed it, the one who pushed when others hesitated, the one who believed so hard in the vision that he underestimated every practical obstacle. Classic Sagittarius overconfidence, seeing on the possibility, seeing the big picture, but missing the details, the logistics, the reality on the ground. May 1915, demoted from the Admiralty as a condition of the Conservatives joining the coalition government. He's given some meaningless position. He calls it a political intrigue, says, "I am finished." That SAG optimism takes a hit. Hard. But here's the thing about Jupiter in Libra. It keeps you bouncing back. November 1915, Churchill doesn't slink away in shame. He resigns from the government entirely, picks up a rifle, goes to the Western Front to command an infantry battalion of the Royal Scots Fusiliers. If he's going down in the fight. Several brushes with death front shows his men he's not afraid. By 1917, he's back in government as Minister of Munitions because you cannot keep Sagittarius down. But the ghosts of Gallipoli follow him for decades. When he'd stand to speak in the House of Commons, opponents would taunt, "Remember the Dardanelles." When he ran for Parliament in 1923, hecklers screamed, "What about the Dardanelles?" His response? Pure SAG refusal to be shamed. The Dardanelles might have saved millions of lives. Don't imagine I am running away from the Dardanelles. I glory in it. Glory in the failure. Only Sagittarius, the 1930s, the wilderness power out of favor. Painting at his country estate, writing books and articles, drinking heavily, warning about Hitler while everyone else pursued appeasement. Neville Chamberlain signed the Munich Agreement in 1938, giving Hitler a chunk of Czechoslovakia in exchange for a promise of peace. Churchill called it throwing a small state to the wolves. Everyone thought he was a warmonger, a relic. Finished. Depression ran in his family. He called it his black dog. And this is important because Sagittarius is known for optimism, but that doesn't mean they don't wrestle darkness. It means they fight through it, that Jupiter expansiveness swings both ways. Expansive joy, but also expansive despair. Churchill fought that black dog his entire life. But the SAG eventually finds the light again. Eventually claws back to optimism. And he did. Remember that overconfidence that nearly destroyed him at Gallipoli? Watch how he channels it differently when Britain's actually facing annihilation. May 10th, 1940. The same day Germany invades France and the Low Countries, Churchill becomes Prime Minister at 65. Britain's situation? Objectively hopeless. France surrenders 6 weeks later. The British Army barely escapes Dunkirk. Invasion seems inevitable. Most of Europe has fallen. Reasonable people are discussing terms of surrender. This is the moment his entire chart was built for. First speech as Prime Minister. "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Not false hope, not empty promises, brutal honesty wrapped in Sagittarius faith, Mercury in Scorpio cutting through the fluff, SAG optimism providing the belief. We have before us many, many long months of struggle and suffering. You ask, what is our policy? I say, it is to wage war, with all our might and with all the strength that God can give us." June 4th, 1940, after Dunkirk. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Leo Moon making it theatrical. Mercury in Scorpio making it penetrating. Sagittarius Sun making it hopeful against all odds. June 18th, 1940. This was their finest hour. He's already writing the history, already framing the narrative. Sagittarius knows the power of story. These weren't just speeches, they were performances, rituals. The Leo Moon loved the spotlight, loved the drama. understood that his job was to embody defiance, to be the symbol, and he committed fully. The drinking we're about to discuss, this is where Venus in Sagittarius becomes either self-destruction or superpower, and somehow, impossibly, Churchill turned it into stamina. His daily routine during the war: wake up around 7:30 a.m., stay in bed, work from bed, eat breakfast in bed, read all the newspapers in bed, and drink the Papa cocktail. A splash of Johnny Walker Red Label coating the bottom of a glass filled with soda water. His daughter called it that. He sipped it all morning, called it his mouthwash. When he was younger, he said he made it a rule never to take strong drink before lunch. Now, his rule was never to do so before breakfast. Most people can't keep a houseplant alive, and this man's out here hydrating exclusively with whiskey and Paul Roger. Around 11 a.m., out of bed, stroll around the garden, another whiskey and soda. 1 p.m., multi-course lunch, an entire bottle of champagne, imperial pint every single day. His favorite was Paul Roger. Estimates put his lifetime consumption at 42,000 bottles. 42,000. That's not a habit. That's a relationship. Afternoon. Buckets of claret and soda between meals, then his sacred siesta, a nap. He'd learned it as a young war correspondent in Cuba and kept the habit his whole life. Wrote to his nephew, "Don't think you will be doing less work because you sleep during the day. That's a foolish notion held by people who have no imagination." Evening. Another multi-course dinner, another bottle of champagne, then port, then brandy, then more whiskey and soda late into the night as he worked. He stayed up until 2 or 3 a.m. strategizing, dictating memos, planning. His staff was exhausted trying to keep up. White House staffers during FDR's administration had a term for when Churchill visited: Winston hours. The two leaders would stay up all night drinking brandy, smoking cigars, talking strategy. Afterwards, FDR needed to sleep 10 hours a night for 3 nights straight to recover. And the cigars. His humidor at Chartwell held 3 Suzanne to 4,000 cigars. That's enough to last just under a year. In 1931, he was hit by a car in New York City because he forgot Americans drive on the right side of the road. They strapped him to a gurney, put him in an ambulance. There's a photo. He's smiling, puffing on his cigar, on a stretcher, after being hit by a car. This should have ended him by 50. Churchill lived to 90 because Venus in Sagittarius excess, when channeled into purpose, becomes fuel. The indulgence wasn't escapism. It was how he maintained the optimism. The whiskey, the cigars, the champagne, they weren't vices. They were tools. They kept his spirit alive, kept the black dog at bay. Let him believe, truly believe, that Britain would win when every fact said otherwise. The great communicator, his speeches won the war as much as military strategy. Mercury and Scorpio gave him phrases that cut straight to hearts. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Honoring the RAF pilots, making them mythic. This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning. After the victory at El Alamein, framing the narrative, giving people hope. Sagittarius knows how words work, how the right phrase at the right moment changes everything. He was writing the story as it happened, giving people something to believe in when belief seemed insane. War leadership, formed the alliance with Franklin Roosevelt, Jupiter in Libra diplomatic genius, visited troops constantly because SAG needs to be in the action, made bold strategic calls. North Africa, D-Day planning. His presence, that portly figure with the cigar and the V sign, became the symbol of British defiance. And that, Leo Moon. Every speech was a performance for history. He knew it, embraced it, made wwii into theater, into myth, into the greatest story ever told, with himself as the hero who refused to quit. May 8, 1945. Germany surrenders. Victory in Europe. Churchill is the hero of the free world. The man who stood against Hitler when standing seemed futile. The man who saved democracy. July 5, 1945. British general election, 2 months after victory. Churchill expects to win. Obviously, he's the man who won the war. Labour Party wins in a landslide. Clement Attlee destroys him. The British people want social reform, want the welfare state, want domestic change. They don't want the warrior leader anymore. His wife Clementine tries to comfort him. "It may well be a blessing in disguise," Churchill responds. "At the moment it seems quite effectively disguised." The Sagittarius devastation, because this wasn't how the story was supposed to end. He saved Britain, saved democracy, and they voted him out. Immediately. The grand narrative doesn't make sense. But here's Sag resilience. He doesn't slink away. He writes the history, literally. His 6-volume history of World War II wins him the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953. If he can't control the narrative in real time, he'll control it in the retelling, and he does. Returns as Prime Minister 1951 to 1955, because Sagittarius always bounces back, always finds another act. Though by then he's in his late 70s, his health failing, the world changing around him. Died January 24th, 1965, age 90. 70 years to the day after his father's death. State funeral. 6 sovereigns attended, 15 heads of state, 6,000 people. The greatest state funeral for a commoner since the Duke of Wellington in 1852. On his bedside table when he died, only one photo, not his wife, not his children, Mrs. Everest, his nanny, gone 70 years but still there, still the person who loved him first, still the fireside where he dried his tears. The contradictions are the point. Brilliant, but made catastrophic mistakes. Saved democracy, but opposed Indian independence. Visionary about Hitler, but wrong about so many other things. Drank constantly, but lived to 90. Depressive, but eternally optimistic. Mars in Libra, showing up. Warrior for justice, but sometimes unjust in methods. Strategic, but also reckless. Only a Sagittarius could have done what he did. Only someone with that irrational, unshakable optimism could inspire hope when hope made no logical sense. The eternal optimism paired with Leo dramatic delivery paired with Mars in Libra strategic thinking. That combination created the perfect wartime leader. Not peacetime, wartime, when things are desperate and people need to believe the impossible. Venus in Sagittarius let him indulge in ways that should have destroyed him. The drinking, the excess, but it fed his stamina, kept his spirit alive during the darkest years. He needed the freedom, the adventure, the refusal to be constrained by normal limits. It wasn't healthy by any standard, but it worked. His chart predicted he'd be the philosopher warrior who wins through morale, not just military might. The speeches, the symbolism, the sheer force of personality. He made people believe Britain could stand alone against the Nazi war machine, made them fight when fighting seemed futile. The Gallipoli disaster taught him about Sagittarius' shadow side, the overconfidence, the grand vision without practical grounding. He carried those ghosts for decades, but by World War II he'd learned, still optimistic, still bold, still visionary, but tempered by experience, by failure, by the knowledge that belief alone isn't enough. The wilderness years taught him patience, that being right isn't enough, that timing matters. Most people would have quit, accepted they'd had their shot and blown it. Sagittarius never quits, believes too much in destiny, in the grand narrative, in the idea that if something's meant to happen, it will. May 10th, 1940, the exact right person at the exact right time. Someone else might have been more cautious, more realistic, more willing to negotiate. But Britain didn't need realistic. They needed someone who'd stand there with absolute conviction and say, we're gonna win this. And somehow make everyone believe it. That's Sagittarius magic, the power of irrational optimism when the situation demands it. When logic says surrender and faith says fight. When the smart move is wrong and the impossible move saves everything, his Leo Moon made every speech a masterpiece. The pauses, the emphasis, the drama. He knew he was performing for history, and he committed fully. Mercury in Scorpio gave those speeches teeth. Blunt, direct, cutting, combined with Sag optimism and Leo theater, unstoppable. Jupiter in Libra blessed him with luck in alliances, with FDR, with Stalin, despite hating communism. If Hitler invaded hell, I would at least make a favorable reference to the devil in the House of Commons. Libra rising gave him that diplomatic charm, the appearance that hid the warrior. He lived to 90 despite everything that should have ended him. The optimism literally kept him alive, the belief that he had more to do, more to write, more to say. Sag doesn't quit, doesn't stop. Keeps going because stopping isn't in the vocabulary. The state funeral, the recognition, the Leo Moon finally getting full acknowledgement, thousands lining the streets, world leaders, the hero's send-off, the grand finale his chart demanded. And the legacy? Complicated, flawed, human. He perfect, made mistakes, held views we rightly criticize now. But when Britain needed someone to refuse surrender, to inspire impossible hope, to stand against fascism, his chart delivered. The Sagittarius optimism, the Leo drama, the Libra diplomacy, the Scorpio wit, the Venus excess, the Mars strategy, all of it came together at exactly the right moment in history. That's what happens when a Sagittarius finds their purpose, when the grand vision aligns with reality, when the refusal to give up becomes the thing that saves everything. Churchill's chart predicted a philosopher warrior who'd win through inspiration, and in June 1940, facing down Nazi Germany with nothing but words and will and unshakable faith. That's exactly what he became.